Hey everyone, welcome today. Hope everyone's having a nice week. I'm really excited because today Antonia Bath has agreed to chat with us, and she is the narrator for my newest book, In the Shadow of the Queen, that just came out a couple weeks ago. And I actually was able to listen to the audio because, of course, I pre-ordered it, and so I was really excited to hear. And one of the reasons is because when you write the book and you edit the book, it just feels like it's kind of homework after a while. But when you kind of take that time off from between the time you write the book and it gets published and narrated, it's almost like a new book when you hear someone else read it, it really brings it to life. So it almost makes me feel like I'm a reader, fresh reading a book I never even spent time writing. So I really appreciate Antonia for being here. Why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself, and then I have some questions I want to ask you as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Antonia Bath. I live in Topanga Canyon, California. And I absolutely love doing this book. This is one of my, honestly, one of my favorite books that I've done. And it's funny because as I was recording it, I kept telling people about it. I said, "Oh, this is great! There's so much history in it." And I actually really loved the character of Louise the whole time I was reading it. I felt like I was her, you know what I mean, as I was doing it, and as it went through all the years, I just became more and more related to her, and thank you for having me.
No problem. So what I am just super curious is I read a little bit of your website stuff, and I know you definitely have a musical background and an acting background. So what at what point did you become interested in narrating, and was this like something that you thought you'd like to do, or did it just happen that way?
Um, it sort of just happened. My one of my big auditions that I got, my agent called me one day and said they're looking for a voice match for Hermione Granger, and it was the
Wow.
very first Harry Potter. And I had done a little bit of recording, of voiceovers before. So this is what 20 something years ago, and I'd done a little bit, and I'd done some singing recording, and so when I got to the audition, um, they were all children. so
Wow.
I thought, am I at the right? I don't know if I'm at the right place. I mean, I guess I'm at the right place. So I sat there, and I booked the job. And
Wow.
when they called my agent, they said, "Well, does she need to sign? Does she need to sign some Jackie Coogan account, or does her mother need to be there?" And the agent said, "No, no, no, it's quite
Right.
all right." So I booked that job, and so that put me on the path of, wow, I actually can do different voices,
Hmm.
and I can actually, behind the scenes, make myself younger, make myself into a character. And so that was sort of the one thing that started it. And it was actually for merchandise. So it wasn't for a book. It was for, keychains and Palm Pilots and dolls and things like that.
Right.
Then, um, and then I was in a theater company, and it was a women's theater company. And I did uh, a recording of Oedipus Rex.
Okay. Huh.
Um, and it was about 10 women in a studio, all surrounding, because we were playing the chorus and we were all playing different parts. And that's what really solidified me as wanting to do this. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mainly because I think when you're with a group of people who are all like-minded and you're all on a microphone and
Mhm.
not on a stage, but you are on a stage, you know what I mean? You're having to actually create this character and either be bigger than you would
Right.
normally be, and also have the nuances. And so that's what set me on my path. And then over the years, I've just am I asking? Am I am I talking
No,
too much?
no, I love it. Yeah.
um,
Well, I really love your range because I remember when I started listening, I thought, okay, Louise she's 12 turning 13. But I really like how she did sound like a young girl, and then you aged her up as the story went.
mhm. Yes, and I think that's always that's and the last few books that I have done actually have been, like that. I've had to age the character up.
Hmm.
Um, and then you have to deal with all the different characters that you have. So I mean, for me, I have to go through the entire script or book and just write down every single character that appears,
Yeah.
and decide what I'm going to do with them. And then obviously you have to have the the continuity of it.
Right.
And sometimes I have to go back and re-listen and say, oh gosh, did I sound, how did that sound yesterday? Did I sound, did
Mhm.
I sound the same, or
That makes sense. So what is kind of your process? Like you mentioned, you would read through and write down the characters. Do you have like a code word, like when you're reading an older man or a younger child, or do you just kind of do a little descriptor by each name?
Yes, I do a little character breakdown of what I think they are, or
Mhm.
who I think they are. Um, and sometimes I liken it to a character I already know, or
Yeah.
oh, this seems like so and so. Bertie for me it felt like uh, one of the characters, the brother in Bridgerton. If you've ever seen Bridgerton,
Mhm.
there's a brother in that just had this fun quality to him,
Yeah.
and had that relationship with his sister that just felt just so real and so fun. And so when they have any kind of riff, it's sort of devastating
Yeah.
for them. And I also have that with my own family. I'm the youngest of five, so you know I create some of the characters based on my own
Yeah.
history, my siblings, and especially since there were so many children in that family. Um,
Right. Yeah, which makes it kind of a challenge too.
and I also liked how you described each one, and just how she relates to each one is so different.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I loved, that the Arthur character is so, he's he's not in it a lot, actually, is he? Really? But
No, yeah.
he's so sweet. Like, you get how sweet he is.
Yeah.
Um, so yes, so what I do is I basically I write down all the characters,
Mhm.
and I write a little description next to it. And then I also write, what is the cadence? What is what's the affectation?
Mhm.
Is it slightly Cockney? If there's a maid, I think in most audiobooks, you don't want to go overboard with the dialects or anything
Right.
else, because especially if you're not completely um, adept at them, it's better just to have a hint of something, so it doesn't throw the listener off.
Right.
And so I like to, just have a hint of something, a hint of a region, a hint, because I think if you're not bang on,
Yeah.
I think it can throw people.
I think
Um,
so too. I agree. And I like it when um the voices are not an extreme, like I guess an overdone
right.
voice. Like sometimes I remember listening to audiobooks, way back when they're on cassettes and CDs, and sometimes you'll get a narrator that would just do like this falsetto, and it just totally pulls you out of the story for that character.
Yes, it
But
does.
so do you like read the whole book, or do you like read a few chapters at a time and then record?
No, so I read the whole book, and then,
Mhm.
as I said, I write the characters, and then usually the first pass is I might do chapter one. I might record it a couple of times and just see
Mhm.
where my voice sounds, if it sounds where I want the whole book to be.
Right.
Um, and then and usually, because it takes many hours, obviously, I go into my booth, and it's funny because most of my recording was this summer, obviously,
Yeah.
and it's very, very hot where I am. so so I had many times where you can turn the air conditioning on, but
Right.
you can't use it while you're recording. so
Oh boy,
uh,
yeah.
I can usually, what I would do is I do a couple of hours at a time of
Mhm.
recording, and then I'll take a break. Um, and then I'll either listen back, or I'll just keep going,
Yeah.
and just keep the momentum going. And I find that I like to I tend so I'll do, anywhere between 4 and 7 hours a day, and then I can go
Mhm.
back and I can start doing the edits, you know, and
Wow,
see
yeah.
what I'm going to send on to the publisher.
Wow,
Um,
so how long on average does it take you to do a novel the size of, a historical novel? Or how many weeks, I guess?
Well, these days, in the past, you would go into a studio and you'd either have an editor and a director. And these days, with a lot of the recordings, you actually have to do everything yourself. So that does double the time. So I would say, it would take me for me, it takes a good week to 2 weeks, like full time,
Right.
living, eating, breathing it, for it to be finished. And, and I tend to I also like to work at nighttime. So what I like to do is record during the day and then come back into the studio and do all the edits at night. And then, you're just in here and I can put my headphones on and just be quiet. And it's also, especially at nighttime when it's nice and quiet, you can just listen. You can listen to the voices. You can listen to see if you're on the right track and all of that. And then usually you send it to the publisher, and then they'll give you the pickups. So they have someone proofing it, and then they'll send the pickups back. And then you record the pickups.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like you get chosen for stories set in Europe a lot because you're native to England, right?
Yes.
Originally, yeah.
Yes. And the last one I did right before this was called A History of Delusions. And that was set everywhere. So there was a lot of French pronunciation and there was a lot of Italian pronunciation. And sometimes they'll just send you a book based on your voice. And so you don't quite know. Like for me, there was a lot of pronunciations that it took actually longer because you're looking everything up just to make sure you're, pronouncing it absolutely right. So yes, most of the books that I've done will either be English, or a lot of what I was doing previously was sort of public domain, A Christmas Carol, Pride and Prejudice. I did a lot of abridged versions of books.
Okay.
And then I got into, during COVID, I got into recording there's a company called Learning Ally that does recorded books for students. And they're brilliant because they record everything. And I did a fantastic novel based in World War II. And that had a lot of German in it. And again, so I'm not a versed German dialect, but you can just put a hint of it. And it was actually fascinating. It was about, and it also took place with a little girl who was 11.
Wow.
And it takes place in a lighthouse. And that was really a really wonderful book. And again, so those are the kind of books. They're historical, they're romantic, a lot of like romantic things.
So do dialects come like natural to you? Is that just one of your natural born talents but you still, you probably still have to look up some things, but is it something that, like, I don't even think I could ever do a dialect. I would just laugh at myself.
I think you have to learn it. I think it's something that has to be practiced. And I think, am I an expert? No, by no means. But I definitely like to try them. And I definitely like to, I can hear things.
Okay.
It's like when you can play a piano by ear.
Right.
I can hear and I can copy. And I think that sometimes can be, some people can just listen to things and just immediately have it. And I'm not that, but I definitely have a good ear. And I have a friend who's a voiceover artist, and she does a lot of animation. And she went around the world, literally around the world. She could tell you where you were from. Her dialects are so good. She could say, you live in Salt Lake City. Do you live on such and such street? She could.
Right.
She's like a Henry Higgins, of dialects, and she teaches dialects, and she's sort of brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's just fascinating because I cannot play by ear, and I just feel like it's just almost like a separate part of your brain that works that mine doesn't work that way. Like even singing, just having that talent of singing, and I have two sisters that are beautiful singers, and then my younger sister and I were like, no, we'll sing in a chorus or in a congregation, but not ever alone.
See, and I think everyone can. As a singer, I think everyone knows how to sing, and I think somewhere along the line we're told we can't, or something in our brain
Yeah, probably.
says, you can't. My husband was told by his mother that he couldn't sing, so he never sang, and he's got
Yeah,
a great
and
voice.
it could be just voice. It could just be like what you said, voice lessons and some confidence or something.
I do truly believe that. I think everyone has it. It's funny. It's. I was watching something about Alzheimer's patients and how they were. We all have what's called a music box in our brain, and
Mhm.
there's that familiarity of music. And they were putting headphones on patients who were nonverbal, and
Wow.
when they put a certain piece of music on, they would immediately come to life. and
Wow.
and they may not have spoken for months or years even, and there's something about it that we retain. And so for me, being a musician, I think that we've all got that in our heads,
Mhm.
and that ability.
I actually write, and this might surprise some people, but I write to music where some people, and it doesn't matter if it has lyrics or not, but it's really just more the mood of the era. So with this book, I downloaded a bunch of Schubert and just different classical. I know that she played Mendelssohn, and I found a website that listed all the songs that were performed at her wedding. And so I had this little playlist of just her wedding songs. And so when I was writing that scene and the ones before and ones right after, that's what I was playing when I was writing. Because I felt like music, like just like you said, music to me just definitely uplifts me and
Mhm.
inspires me. And once I start that playlist, it's like I'm immediately in the world of the book, and I don't have to try to just because it is hard. It's hard to shift just from regular life just to your book world and your characters and trying to like keep that consistency going. So music definitely has helped me a lot.
No, that's so true. And it's funny because when, you know, the whole part that you write about them going into mourning, and the
Mhm.
idea that the children couldn't run and they couldn't play, and they this constant sort of awful depression that they had to
Yeah.
be in, I mean, it must have been horrendous. And I one of the scenes I absolutely loved in the book was um, when she's at the party with all the suitors, and uh, or not even at the party, but at the in the evening, and
Yeah.
the sister's playing the piano, and they're all sort of ignoring her, and then he comes in, and it becomes this great
Mhm.
party, and they're all singing, and and that to me is it was just one of my favorite scenes, because you could see how much that for her was like a thing. She
Mhm.
just looked at him and went, oh, okay, that's why I
Yeah.
like you, you know because you joined in and you became this beautiful um spirit in this room.
Right. And it doesn't mean you're not going to have problems in a relationship, but when you have those kind of connections, it can really, I guess, help you endure the hard stuff. But I remember when doing the research on John Campbell or Lord Lorne, and wow, he was a singer, and he was very, very artistic, and so was Louise. Like they both had kind of different types of art. They were, he was very prolific. He was a poet, and he has tons of publications. I even bought some of his publications, and and I just found that the way they spoke to each other was always darling and dear, and just a lot of those types of language is just very, very flowery language. So I didn't like go way overboard on it, but I definitely try to keep some of that in, with just the way that they perceive life, and kind of a little bit dramatic. I thought it was interesting. There's letters between, especially Prince Leopold and Princess Louise, about how much they hated Balmoral and all this stuff. And so like that week leading up to Queen Elizabeth II's death, she was at Balmoral, and it was like her favorite place. And you can go over there and do these amazing tours, but as children, you see life differently. But I'm sure as adults, I didn't get I could have written probably 3 books on Louise's life because there's so much there. But it just is interesting how all those little components, just knowing that John Campbell had a fine tenor voice. I'm like, oh, that just opens up this whole range of possibilities. Yeah.
And it's funny because after I finished the book, I was looking up the Duke of Argyll, and the first thing that came up was the Great British Scandal. Did you see that?
I think I remember that. Yeah.
It was a mini series. And so obviously many generations, the next Duke of Argyll was just absolutely awful and just a nightmare. And I didn't know the story at all. And, I watched the whole series and it was just, oh my goodness.
Maybe I didn't watch it then. I remember seeing that. But I've actually watched a YouTube video on the current Duke of Argyll. And I can't remember, he just talked about his family. It was on YouTube, and it was kind of interesting to see the modern family. And I'd love to go and tour Inverary and just see all those places someday.
It actually made me want to go to Inverary. And it basically part of this story was that the Duchess had completely used all her money to renovate, and then of course he divorced her after all of it. He divorced her.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I think one of the things I wanted to say about your book was that I loved how you humanized the royal family. And because we all set them apart. I know for me, I've always set them apart. Even though I've seen them, I've been in their presence, in various situations in my life. And the idea that all those children was so sweet, and you definitely gave them all these characters. And then what you did with Victoria also, she became this, this tragic woman, but also very strong. And you felt for her throughout the whole book. I did anyway.
For sure. Just as a mother, and just, being in her situation, how difficult that would have been. And also, I think she did have a lot of mental health struggles that were obviously untreated and undiagnosed. And so even as a mom myself, it's like my kids are all adults now, but I just worry about them like all the time. Like, how do you bring that off,
Of course, no, and of course, and and I think she even says at one point, doesn't she? I think you had her say that, like, I something about I will be with my children for the rest of my life, or my children will be my worry for the rest of my life, or something, But even the fact that she built that studio for Louise, and that's still there, isn't it?
Yeah. In fact, I did message the museum, or it's not really a museum name, but one of the curators at Osborne, and he described the room to me, and he said it's very small. There's not very much light in it. So I realized she would have had to work, whenever the light was there. That working at night with, gas lamps or candles around may not have helped very much. So, but he just said, yeah, it's very small. And like, well, and I wrote this book. It was basically the first like 7 or 8 months of 2021. So it wasn't really possible to do a trip. It was just sort of still the iffy time after COVID. Well, it was still COVID, but, and so that's why I wasn't able to go over until this year. And I was hoping on my trip, I'm like, I hope there's nothing that I feel like, oh, I should have put this in. And I really didn't feel that way. Because I feel like I had there was 4 or 5 biographies that I read just on Princess Louise, and a couple on Queen Victoria. And I had one on Bertie and Leopold. And I read a historical novel on Vicky, the oldest, who's also Vicky. But I felt like, well, I think that these historians knew, and me just, seeing, one of the buildings may not have added to it. But the only thing is I wish I really would like to go through Windsor someday, but that's just going to be another trip.
And of course.
So yeah. Anyway, well, I really appreciate you coming on, and it's been so fun to hear about your process and to get to know you a little bit better. And I don't know, I'm kind of an audiobook geek, so I geek out a little bit getting to know the narrator too. So
yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for, allowing me to bring your work to life.
No problem. Well, take care, and thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll put this around the internet in the next couple days. So have a good weekend.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.